success is such a funny concept. One person might think they're very successful, and to everyone else in the world, they're not. Now, this could be represented by going, the meaning of life is money, or the meaning of life is family, or whatever. And it's interesting how views of success change as you grow up, as you get older, all those things. I remember when my sister and I were young, I must have been 11, so then make her 9. We were moving house, and as we were inspecting all the different houses, my sister and I had decided that the only thing that mattered was stairs. It didn't matter if you had 5 floors or 2 floors, any amount of stairs inside the house qualified it to be a mansion. So everything that we were looking at, we only cared about having stairs. It could have had pools, it could have had 3 bedrooms each, but all we cared about was stairs. Eventually we did move into a place that had 2 stories, and we got our stairs, and to us that was just the most amazing thing. We didn't know any of our friends who had stairs in their house, so we felt like we were the most successful you could ever be, even though of course it was our parents who bought the place, not us. My dad didn't share the same view, and I think his compensation when he turned, 50, he bought a pool table, billiard table. To him that was the definition of success, having that in your own home. Now it was a small pool table, not one of the larger ones, and the room it was in was a little bit too small, so it was a little bit cramped, but to him that was the thing. And he decked that room out a little bit and eventually made a pool table light. Those big behemoth things. And back then LEDs weren't a thing, so it was quite deep, quite bulky and heavy. It fit around an existing light fixture and bar fixture and all of that. So the lights were fine, but it was never amazing. And it was quite heavy because Dad just didn't have the tools or the skills necessarily to make something light. Now my mind, for whatever reason, focused not on the pool table, but on the light above it. That was the fanciest thing that I could think of at the time, and that stuck around in my head every now and again, rattling around how I want one of those. Not the pool table light. Now, it was nothing fancy that Dad built. As far as I know, it was just MDF, like 3/4 inch, 19mm MDF, painted and had all the tassels around it. I have no use for the tassels, but now that I have a board game room and I have a board game table, I actually do have a use for a pool table-like light. However, these days, LEDs exist, LED panels exist, so it's going to be a huge amount of light, huge amount of nice light. I just need to shape that light so that it's directed at the table. This light fixture will consist of 2 main assemblies. The rectangle that I've built so far is just for the LED panel to sit onto, and we'll talk a little bit more about the panel a bit later. The cable wire that will suspend the whole thing will attach to this rectangle as well. I toyed with the idea of gold leaf in a hex pattern or something like that to tie in with the rest of the board game theme going throughout the room, but ultimately decided that the light fixture shouldn't really be the centerpiece of the room. If anything, I want it to be very purposefully bland, so it blends in and it's just there, but you don't really notice it. To that end, I've tried to make a shaker-styled light shade with the typical frame and panel look. For some strange reason, I don't think there's a proper shaker pool table light to base it off, so I'm just going for the vague vibes. Along the long edges, the frame is just a rectangle, but on the ends, it's a trapezoid. It would have been neat to have a trapezoid on all sides, a little bit more work, but it would have been a little bit pointy for players on the end. And board game night was never the same after Greg became a Cyclops. Strength to weight, it makes a lot of sense to use hardwood here. With no glue between the layers, it certainly weighs less than the equivalent of most plywoods. Pine would have been a better choice for weight, but I have quite the collection of hardwood offcuts that I am desperate to use up. The grooves are stopped to accept the panels and the rebates, and for however brief it was, this felt like actual real woodworking using hand tools rather than the cabinetry that I've been doing a lot of lately. Speaking of the panels, because the whole thing is going to be painted, it's very hard to go past 3mm MDF, which I have just a ton of offcuts on hand at the moment. 3mm poplar plywood would have been lighter, but at this scale, the difference really isn't huge. But the extra work to make poplar plywood prepared for paint, what an alliteration, it just doesn't make sense in this context. The bevel here matches the angle of the trapezoid. This is the first time I've primed with this paint with a roller, and it will be the last. What an awful experience compared to spraying. The interior will remain just primed as the white reflects the light really well. On the outside, however, I did relent and broke out the sprayer. This is the same paint I used in the boardroom cabinets, along with Floetrol to make it spray better. The hardwood braces have three functions. They stiffen the rectangle, they stop the LED panel from sliding side to side, and they, well, used up more scraps. It's always a win. This was a nightmare to get on video. It was just so awkward. I'm using 2mm cable wire with matching swages to crimp it all together. The idea with using black wire is it'll visually disappear a bit better than chrome. To hide the swage and more of the chrome, a piece of heat shrink is heat shrunk over it. I can't really get away with not talking about the wiring situation. It's not pretty. Here in Australia, it is illegal to do any DIY electrical work, so I haven't. It's fine to run a power lead down to a standard power point because this light fixture just has a standard 240 volt Australian plug on it, so I can do that just fine. We will eventually get a sparky in to add a power point to the ceiling, but we're not going to get an electrician out just for one power point, so we're building up a list of things that we want to get done all at once, so we're saving a bit of money on the call out fee. Now I said I'd talk a little bit more about the panel itself. It is a Mercator Donovan, Mercator being the brand manufacturer and Donovan is the model. It is a smart home light. It is a 1200 by 300 troffer light. That's, you know, the standard sort of thing that you'd use in a drop ceiling. I've used similar types in the workshop. Produces a really good quality light. I'm quite happy with it. We've had this up for about a month now and we really like what it does on the table, and that looks great. What I don't love about it is that when it's on at the wall but off in software, because again it's a smart home light, there is a 7 kilohertz noise that it produces. Now it's not super loud, but I have the type of autism where I can hear the electricity in the walls, so I really don't like that. Our solution at the moment is we turn it off at the wall and we don't use the smart controls for it. And the smart controls for it work like a good 80% of the time. It's just this light that it doesn't always respond. The controller in it isn't amazing. When it works, it's great and it's very bright. But sometimes it'll turn itself on maybe a minute after you press the on button. None of the other lights in the house do that, so it's just this controller. Unfortunately, I can't recommend it because of the 7 kilohertz thing. The rest of it I could live with because it does produce a really nice quality light, just that noise, which is fine by the manufacturer, I can't deal with very well. Off camera, I did screw in these blocks just before install. The light frame, the square frame, rectangular frame that I've made, doesn't actually sit on this. This just prevents when it tilts, if it tilts, from tilting up and sliding out of the whole shade. So there's one at each end just for the install process. I could remove that now, but there's no real downside to it. Bringing this full circle, Dad would have absolutely adored this. It's very much up his alley type thing. Smart home stuff wasn't really a thing while he was still around, but he would have loved this over his pool table, having all the colour tunable, dimmable stuff. We've had this up for about a month now, and or maybe a little bit longer, and it produces just such a nice experience in here because you're never struggling to read the rules or your game pieces or anything like that, because it's just flooded in a nice diffused light thanks to the panel itself. Still have a few touch-ups to do. Got a bit of overspray over the green and a little bit of sanding here and there, but really happy, simple project. Thanks for watching.